The thing about blind spots is that they're invisible until something crashes through them. This is the story of Detective Marcus Webb, a cargo inspector at the port of Long Beach, California, who thought he'd seen everything in his 23 years on the job. Container ships from Shanghai carrying knockoff designer handbags. Crates from Rotterdam hiding unregistered firearms. Wooden pallets from Manila concealing methamphetamine in hollowed-out furniture legs. Marcus had uncovered them all, methodically, quietly, efficiently. He wasn't the kind of man who craved headlines or commendations. He simply believed in order, in the thin line between chaos and civilization that people like him maintained every single day. But on a fog-choked Tuesday morning in March, Marcus Webb would discover that some blind spots aren't accidents of perception. Some are deliberately constructed, meticulously maintained, and protected by people who operate so far above his pay grade that even acknowledging their existence could get you killed. It started with Manifest 4477-B. Before we dive into tonight's story, if you're ready for an edge-of-your-seat suspense that'll reveal the hidden corridors of power and deception running through the heart of America, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now, smash the notification bell so you never miss a story like this, and share this with someone who loves a good mystery. Trust me, you're going to want to discuss this one when it's over. Now, let's begin. Marcus stood in the cavernous warehouse district of Terminal 5, watching as a 40-foot shipping container was offloaded from the MV Pacific Wanderer, a Liberian-flagged vessel that made the Shanghai to Los Angeles run every 17 days like clockwork. The container was unremarkable, weathered blue paint, rust blooming at the corners, covered in the incomprehensible codes and stamps that formed the container shipping industry's secret language. According to the manifest, it contained automotive parts. Brake pads, alternators, steering columns destined for a distributor in Phoenix. Marcus had flagged it for random inspection. Purely routine. His partner that morning was Jake Reeves, a younger inspector with 6 years on the job and an unfortunate addiction to energy drinks and conspiracy theory podcasts. Jake was talking about chemtrails as they approached the container with bolt cutters, and Marcus was only half listening, running through his mental checklist. Check the seal number against the manifest. Verify it hasn't been tampered with. Open the doors. Visual inspection. Random sampling if necessary. Sign off. Move to the next one. The seal number matched. Container 4477-B. Sealed in Shanghai 11 days ago. Marcus cut the seal. The doors swung open with a metallic groan that always reminded Marcus of some great beast sighing in its sleep. The container's interior was dark, and the smell hit them first. Machine oil, cardboard, that distinctive industrial scent of mass-manufactured goods. Perfectly normal. Perfectly normal, that is, until Marcus's flashlight beam caught something that shouldn't have been there. A shoe. Not in a box. Not on a pallet. Just a shoe, a woman's black leather flat, size 7 or 8, lying on its side in the narrow gap between two pallets of shrink-wrapped cardboard boxes. "Jake," Marcus said quietly. "Call it in." "Call what in?" "It's just a shoe, man. Probably fell off a pallet somewhere." But Marcus was already climbing into the container, his flashlight sweeping systematically across every surface. The boxes were labeled in Mandarin and English. Automotive parts, just like the manifest said. But that shoe. A shoe meant someone had been in here after it was packed and sealed. A shoe meant human presence where there shouldn't have been any. He found the first body wedged behind a stack of boxes in the far corner. A woman, Asian, maybe 30 years old, curled in the fetal position. Her skin had the waxy bluish tint of someone who'd been dead for days. Hypothermia, Marcus thought immediately. Asphyxiation. The container would have been sealed, airtight. Once the ship was underway, the oxygen would have run out in hours. "Jake, call it in now." Marcus's voice was sharp. "We've got a deceased." But Jake was frozen at the container's entrance, staring at something Marcus couldn't see from his angle. "Marcus," Jake said, his voice strangled. "There's more. A lot more." Marcus climbed over the pallets, his heart hammering against his ribs. 12 bodies. All women. Ages ranging from what looked like late teens to mid-40s. All Asian. All arranged in the narrow spaces between the cargo, like they'd been trying to make themselves as small as possible, trying not to take up valuable shipping space even as they died. Human cargo. Marcus had been an inspector for 23 years, and he'd heard the stories, the rumors of human trafficking through the ports. But this was different. This was industrial. Systematic. 12 women in a single container, hidden among legitimate cargo, with paperwork that would have sailed through customs without a second glance if Marcus hadn't randomly selected it for inspection. The investigation that followed moved with the speed of bureaucracy, which is to say it didn't move at all. The FBI came. Homeland Security came. ICE came. They took statements, photographed the scene, removed the bodies, sealed the container as evidence, and impounded the entire shipment. Marcus was told to keep his mouth shut pending the investigation. Standard procedure. He understood. What he didn't understand was the silence that followed. A week passed. 2 weeks. Marcus checked in with his supervisor, Captain Holland, a career customs officer with 30 years on the job and a face like a basset hound. "What's the status on the 4477B investigation?" Marcus asked. Holland didn't look up from his computer. "Federal matter now, Webb. Not our circus. 12 dead women, Captain. Someone had to load them into that container. Someone had to process the paperwork. Someone on the Chinese side, someone on our side. This is a network. And the feds are investigating it. Drop it." But Marcus couldn't drop it. Because 3 days later, he saw Manifest 6823A. Different container. Different ship. This one from the MV Eastern Promise out of Shenzhen. The manifest listed electronics, computer components, LED screens, circuit boards for a tech company in Austin. Marcus wasn't assigned to inspect it. He just happened to be walking past Terminal 7 when he saw the container number and something clicked in his brain. He pulled out his phone and checked his notes from the first container. Both manifests had the same freight forwarder listed, Pacific Gateway Logistics, a company Marcus had never heard of before last month and now had seen twice in connection with containers that had, at minimum, extremely irregular circumstances. Marcus went home that night and did something he'd never done before. He accessed the port's database from his personal laptop using his login credentials. He searched for every container that had come through Long Beach in the past 6 months with Pacific Gateway Logistics listed as the freight forwarder. 17 containers. All from various Chinese ports. All declaring different cargo. Automotive parts, electronics, furniture, textiles, industrial equipment. All arriving on different ships operated by different companies. All destined for different cities across America. Marcus created a spreadsheet. He noted arrival dates, origin ports, declared cargo, destination addresses. And as he stared at the data, a pattern emerged that made his blood run cold. Every 17 days. Like clockwork. For 6 months. A container from Pacific Gateway Logistics arrived at the port of Long Beach every 17 days. Different ships, different origins, but always 17 days. And if each container held 12 people like the first one, Marcus did the math. Approximately 10 containers over 6 months. Potentially 120 people. Smuggled through one of the busiest ports in America under the cover of legitimate trade. But only one container had been discovered. Only one had been opened. Which meant the others had gone through. The question that kept Marcus awake that night wasn't where the containers were going. The destinations were listed right there in the manifests. Warehouses in Phoenix, distribution centers in Houston, fulfillment facilities in Chicago. The question was what happened to the people when they arrived. Because if 12 women had died in transit in one container, but the operation kept running every 17 days like clockwork, that meant the smugglers considered those deaths acceptable losses. Overhead. Breakage. The cost of doing business. It meant the operation was big enough, profitable enough, protected enough that losing 12 human beings didn't even cause a pause. Marcus knew he should take this to the FBI. He should take this to Homeland Security. He should follow procedure, file the report, let the system work. But the system had already had this information for 2 weeks and had done nothing visible with it. So instead, Marcus did something stupid. He decided to investigate on his own. Pacific Gateway Logistics had an address in Los Angeles, a small office in a commercial district near LAX. Marcus drove there on his day off, telling himself he was just going to observe, maybe get a sense of the operation. The office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. The windows were tinted dark, and a small placard beside the door read, Pacific Gateway Logistics, Import-Export Services, by appointment only. Marcus sat in his car across the street for 3 hours. No one went in. No one came out. The lights stayed off. He was about to leave when a black Mercedes SUV pulled into the parking lot and stopped in front of the Pacific Gateway office. 2 men got out. One was Asian, maybe Chinese, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a leather briefcase. The other was white, mid-50s, with the bearing of ex-military or law enforcement. Buzz cut, broad shoulders, alert eyes that scanned the parking lot before he opened the office door for his companion. They were inside for 7 minutes. When they emerged, the Asian man was no longer carrying the briefcase. Marcus noted the Mercedes's license plate and ran it through a database he technically wasn't supposed to access from his personal device. The vehicle was registered to a company called Westridge Security Consultants, based in Irvine. Marcus went home and fell down a rabbit hole. Westridge Security Consultants was a private military contractor, one of dozens that had proliferated after September 11th when the government started outsourcing everything from embassy protection to interrogation services. Their website was sparse, corporate, professional, providing comprehensive security solutions for government and private sector clients since 2003. A list of services: risk assessment, asset protection, logistic support, personnel training. Nothing about import, export. Nothing about shipping containers. But when Marcus started searching news articles, he found something interesting. 3 years ago, Westridge had been briefly mentioned in a congressional investigation into fraud in Afghanistan reconstruction contracts. Something about overbilling the State Department for security services that were never provided. The investigation had been quietly closed without charges. One of the congressional staffers who'd worked on that investigation was a woman named Rachel Torres. Marcus found her on LinkedIn. She'd left government service and now worked as a researcher for a non-profit that investigated defense contractor corruption. Marcus sent her an email. He kept it vague, potentially interested in discussing some irregularities I've observed in shipping manifests that might connect to companies you've researched. Can we talk? She replied within an hour. How about never talking via email again? If you're serious, call this number from a phone that isn't registered to you. Marcus bought a burner phone the next day. Rachel Torres met him at a coffee shop in Pasadena, as far from the port of Long Beach as they could get while still remaining in Los Angeles County. She was younger than Marcus expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a wariness that suggested she'd seen things that had permanently recalibrated her trust settings. "You're a customs inspector," she said after he introduced himself. It wasn't a question. "How did you know?" "Because anyone from the intelligence community would know better than to contact me directly, and anyone from law enforcement would have come with a partner or a wire. That leaves you as either a genuine concerned citizen, which is rare, or someone setting me up, which is common but usually involves more finesse. I'm going with concerned citizen." Marcus told her everything. The container. The bodies. The pattern. Pacific Gateway Logistics. Westridge Security Consultants. Rachel listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes in a small leather journal. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know why that congressional investigation into Westridge died?" she finally asked. "No. Because the documents we needed to prove the fraud were classified. And when we tried to get them declassified, we were told that doing so would compromise ongoing intelligence operations. Westridge wasn't just bilking the government. They were providing services that the government needed but couldn't officially acknowledge. Rendition logistics. Black site personnel. The kind of things that don't appear in official budgets. What does that have to do with human trafficking? Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Here's what I can tell you. Companies like Westridge exist in the space between legal and illegal, between government and private sector. They have relationships with customs, with immigration, with law enforcement. They can move things across borders that normal companies can't because they have the right credentials, the right connections, the right paperwork. If you wanted to run a large-scale smuggling operation through one of the busiest ports in America, having a company like Westridge involved would make it possible. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. You're saying the government is involved. I'm saying the government might be looking the other way. There's a difference. Westridge provides services the government wants. In exchange, maybe certain shipments don't get inspected too carefully. Maybe certain manifests get waved through. Maybe inspectors who ask too many questions get told to drop it. Like I was told to drop it. Exactly like that. Marcus leaned back in his chair. So what do I do? You have two options. Option 1. Go to the media. Find a journalist who specializes in investigative work, give them everything you have, and hope the story is big enough that they can't suppress it. Option 2. Walk away. Go back to your job, inspect the containers they tell you to inspect, and pretend you never saw Manifest 4477B. That's not an option. It's always an option, Marcus. It's the option most people choose because the alternative is career suicide at best and actual suicide at worst. People who threaten powerful networks tend to have accidents. Ask any journalist who's ever investigated the defense industry. There's no option 3. Rachel smiled, but there was no humor in it. Option 3 is what I'm doing. Gather evidence, build a case, find allies, and wait for the right moment to strike. But I've been working option 3 for 5 years, and I'm still waiting for that moment. The networks are patient. They can outlast individual reformers. Marcus left the coffee shop feeling like he'd swallowed lead. But he also left with Rachel's secure contact information and a promise that she'd help him dig deeper into Pacific Gateway and Westridge. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus became obsessed. He spent his days at the port doing his job, inspecting containers, filing reports, maintaining the appearance of normal. But his nights were consumed with research. He discovered that Pacific Gateway Logistics was owned by a shell company registered in Delaware, which was in turn owned by another shell company in the Cayman Islands. The trail went cold there, but Rachel had contacts who specialized in piercing corporate veils. They found that the Cayman company had the same registered agent as 17 other companies, all involved in logistics, shipping, and freight forwarding across Southeast Asia and North America. It was a network. A sprawling, sophisticated network designed to move cargo and hide the ownership trail. But cargo of what? The 12 dead women in container 4477B were clearly being trafficked. But for what purpose? Labor. Sex work. Organ harvesting? The questions multiplied faster than the answers. Then Marcus got his first threat. It came in the form of a visit from 2 FBI agents. They showed up at his apartment on a Sunday morning, badges out, faces professionally neutral. Detective Webb, I'm Special Agent Chin. This is Special Agent Rodriguez. We need to ask you some questions about your recent activities. Marcus let them in because refusing would have looked suspicious. They sat in his living room and asked him about the container, about the investigation, about his contacts with Rachel Torres. How do you know about Rachel Torres? Marcus asked. We know about everyone connected to this case, Agent Chin said. Ms. Torres has a history of making unfounded allegations against defense contractors. She's not a reliable source. I found 12 dead women in a shipping container. That's not unfounded. No one is disputing what you found, Detective Webb. We're investigating it thoroughly. But you accessing port databases from your home computer, conducting surveillance on business offices, contacting journalists and activists. That's not your job. That's ours. And when you do it, you compromise our investigation. Agent Rodriguez leaned forward. We understand you're concerned. You saw something terrible, and you want justice. But this is bigger than one container. We have operations running, intelligence gathering, ongoing investigations that could be jeopardized by premature exposure. We need you to step back and let us do our jobs. What operations? Marcus asked. The agents exchanged a glance. That's classified, Chen said. But I can tell you that your container, 4477B, is part of a larger pattern we've been tracking for months. We know about Pacific Gateway. We know about the network. And we're close to making arrests. But if you keep poking around, you're going to spook the people we're watching. They'll scatter, destroy evidence, and we'll lose our chance to bring down the entire organization. It was a compelling argument. Marcus wanted to believe it. He wanted to believe that the system was working, that justice was coming, that his discovery of those 12 women would lead to something meaningful. But he kept thinking about what Rachel had said. The networks are patient. They can outlast individual reformers. How long? Marcus asked. How long until you make arrests? We can't give you a timeline. These operations move on their own schedule. It's been 3 weeks since I found those bodies. 3 weeks, and I haven't heard about any arrests. I haven't heard about any raids. I haven't even heard a public announcement about the case. That's because making it public would compromise the operation, Rodriguez said, an edge of frustration entering his voice. You need to trust the process. After they left, Marcus sat in his apartment for a long time, staring at nothing. Trust the process. How many times had he heard that in his career? How many times had he said it to worried citizens, to people who'd reported suspicious activity, to witnesses who wondered why nothing seemed to be happening? The process worked when people in power wanted it to work. When they didn't, the process became a weapon, a way to delay, to obfuscate, to run out the clock until people forgot or gave up or died. Marcus called Rachel from his burner phone. They came to see me, he said. FBI. Yes. Told me to back off. That was fast. You must have hit a nerve. They said they have an ongoing operation. Said I'm compromising it. That's what they always say, Marcus. Did they give you any evidence that this operation exists? Any timeline for when they'll make arrests? Any details at all? No. It's all classified. Of course it is. Here's a question. If they really have an ongoing operation, why would they come warn you? Why not just let you keep stumbling around in the dark while they do their work? The only reason to visit you is if they want you to stop looking. Which means you're looking at something they don't want you to see. Marcus felt the truth of it in his bones. What do I do? That's up to you. But I can tell you what I'm doing. I'm going to contact a journalist friend who works for the LA Times investigative unit. If you want to give her your evidence, I can make the introduction. But once you do that, there's no going back. You'll be labeled a whistleblower, maybe even a leaker if they can make that stick. Your career in customs is over. Possibly your freedom if they decide to prosecute you for accessing databases without authorization. Marcus thought about the 12 women. He thought about the pattern, the containers arriving every 17 days. He thought about the possibility that even now, as he sat safely in his apartment, another container might be crossing the Pacific with human cargo sealed inside. And no one was inspecting it because someone somewhere had decided it was more important to protect an ongoing operation than to save lives. Make the introduction, Marcus said. The journalist's name was Elena Vasquez, and she'd won a Pulitzer 3 years ago for exposing corruption in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. She met Marcus in a library in Orange County, surrounded by college students studying for midterms, where their conversation could blend into the ambient noise of whispered studying and rustling paper. Marcus gave her everything: the manifests, the pattern, the corporate structure of Pacific Gateway, the connection to Westridge security consultants, the FBI's visit to his apartment, Rachel's research into the congressional investigation. Elena recorded it all on an encrypted device and took notes in shorthand that Marcus couldn't read. "This is good," she said when he finished. "This is very good. But it's not enough for publication." Marcus felt his heart sink. "What more do you need? Right now all I have is a customs inspector who found one container with dead bodies and a lot of circumstantial connections that suggest a pattern. But I don't have confirmation that the other containers actually contained people. I don't have testimony from survivors. I don't have documents showing Westridge's involvement beyond the fact that someone associated with them visited an office. I don't have proof that the FBI is covering anything up beyond the fact that they told you to stop investigating, which is actually pretty normal in ongoing cases. I need more." "How do I get more?" "You don't. I do. This is what I'm good at. But I need you to do something for me. I need you to go back to work, act normal, and keep your eyes open. If another Pacific Gateway container comes through, I need to know about it. If you hear anything about the investigation, I need to know. Can you do that?" Marcus nodded. "And Marcus, be careful. If this story is as big as I think it is, people are going to get hurt. Make sure you're not one of them." For the next week, Marcus went to work, inspected containers, filed reports, and pretended everything was normal. He avoided Captain Holland's eyes during shift briefings. He made small talk with Jake about the Lakers and Jake's dating life. He did everything right. And then Manifest 9012C appeared. Pacific Gateway Logistics. Shanghai origin. Declared cargo. Industrial kitchen equipment. Destination: a warehouse in Riverside, California. Marcus's hands shook as he held the tablet displaying the manifest. It had been 17 days since the last Pacific Gateway container. The pattern held. He looked around the terminal. Hundreds of containers being offloaded, sorted, inspected, cleared. Thousands of tons of cargo moving through the port every hour. And somewhere in that industrial symphony, this one container held something that people were willing to kill to protect. Marcus made a decision. He assigned himself to inspect container 9012C. His supervisor didn't question it. Random inspection assignments were part of the job. Jake was off that day, so Marcus took another inspector, a quiet guy named Bill who was 6 months from retirement and generally unbothered by anything that didn't directly threaten his pension. They approached the container together. Marcus checked the seal. It was intact. He cut it with bolt cutters that suddenly felt like they weighed 100 pounds. The doors swung open. Industrial kitchen equipment. Stainless steel refrigerators, commercial ovens, industrial mixers. All properly packed, properly secured, exactly as the manifest described. No shoes. No bodies. No evidence of human cargo. Marcus stood at the container's entrance, his flashlight beam sweeping across shrink-wrapped appliances, and felt a wave of disorientation. Had he been wrong? Had the first container been a one-off, a single mistake in an otherwise legitimate operation? But then he noticed something. The containers were packed too perfectly. Every appliance aligned, every gap accounted for, no wasted space. It was efficient in a way that normal cargo handlers would never bother with because time was money and perfect packing didn't increase profits. Unless you were trying to hide something. Marcus climbed into the container and began examining the appliances more carefully. He opened the door of a commercial refrigerator. Empty, as expected. He checked another one. Empty. A third one. Not empty. The refrigerator's interior had been modified. The shelves were gone, and in their place was a hollow space just large enough for a person to curl up inside. There was a water bottle, empty. A protein bar wrapper. And stains on the metal floor that looked like urine. Someone had been in here. Marcus checked the next refrigerator. Same modification. And the next. 6 commercial refrigerators, each with a hidden compartment, each showing signs of recent occupation. "Bill," Marcus called out. "We need to document this. And we need to call it in." But when Marcus climbed out of the container, Bill was gone. In his place were two men in dark suits. Not FBI. Not Homeland Security. Their badges said TSA, but their bearing screamed military contractor. One of them was the buzz-cut man Marcus had seen entering the Pacific Gateway Logistics office. "Detective Webb," the man said. "I think we need to have a conversation." Marcus's hand went to his phone, but the second man was faster. He grabbed Marcus's wrist with professional efficiency and removed the phone from his grip. "Just a conversation," Buzzcut said. "Nobody needs to get hurt." They walked Marcus away from the container, away from the busy terminal, toward a black SUV parked in a restricted access area. Marcus's mind raced. They couldn't just disappear him, could they? Not from a busy port in the middle of the day with hundreds of workers around. But as they walked, Marcus noticed how few people were in this section of the terminal. How the security cameras all seemed to be pointed in other directions. How the usual background noise of the port seemed muted, distant. They'd created a blind spot. "Get in the car," Buzzcut said. "I'm a federal employee conducting an official inspection." "You can't." The second man put a hand on Marcus's shoulder, and the pressure he applied suggested that "can't" wasn't really part of their vocabulary. Marcus got in the car. They drove for 20 minutes in silence. Marcus tried to memorize the route, but they took enough turns and switchbacks that he quickly lost his sense of direction. They ended up in an industrial area near the port, lots of warehouses and freight companies, the kind of place where a scream would be swallowed by the sound of diesel engines and loading cranes. The SUV pulled into a warehouse with a roll-up door that closed behind them as soon as they were inside. Buzzcut finally spoke. "My name is Thomas Crown. I work for Westridge Security Consultants. Do you know what we do, Detective Webb?" "Private military contracting." "That's one of the things we do. We also provide logistical support for sensitive government operations. Operations that require discretion, efficiency, and a willingness to work in areas where traditional government agencies have limitations. Like smuggling people in shipping containers." Crown smiled. "Like facilitating the movement of assets across international borders in support of national security interests." "Those aren't assets. They're people. I found 12 dead women in container 4477B. "A tragedy," Crown said, and his tone suggested he meant it. "But a tragedy that occurred in the context of a larger operation that has saved thousands of lives. Do you know what happens to women in certain parts of China if they speak out against the government? If they witness atrocities in Xinjiang? If they try to escape forced labor camps? They disappear. Permanently. What we're doing, what Pacific Gateway facilitates, is giving some of those women a chance to escape. Yes, we have to use shipping containers because we can't exactly fly them out on commercial airlines with fake passports. Yes, sometimes there are losses in transit. But the alternative is those women stay in China and face certain death or worse." Marcus felt the ground shifting under his feet. "You're saying this is a rescue operation?" "I'm saying this is a complicated operation that exists in the gray space between official government policy and practical necessity. The State Department can't openly smuggle dissidents out of China. It would cause an international incident. But they can look the other way while contractors like us do it. They can make sure the right containers don't get inspected. They can ensure that when good-hearted inspectors like yourself stumble onto something, the investigation gets classified and buried in the name of national security. The FBI came to my apartment. At our request. We needed you to stop digging. You were getting close to exposing an operation that's taken years to set up and has saved hundreds of lives." Marcus wanted to believe it. The story Crown was telling had just enough plausibility, just enough moral complexity, that he could almost see it being true. Almost. "Where do they go?" Marcus asked. "The women in the containers. After they arrive in America, where do they go?" Crown hesitated for just a fraction of a second. It was barely noticeable, but Marcus had spent 23 years reading people at customs checkpoints, learning to spot the micro-expressions that betrayed lies. Resettlement programs, Crown said. Safe houses initially, then integration into American society with new identities. We work with advocacy groups, refugee organizations, people who specialize in helping trafficking victims rebuild their lives. I want names. I want contact information for these organizations. I want to talk to one of the women who's been through this program. That's not possible. Security concerns. Then I don't believe you. Crown's expression hardened. What you believe is irrelevant, Detective Webb. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to work and forget you ever saw container 9012, C. You're going to stop contacting journalists and activists. You're going to stop accessing databases you're not authorized to access. And in exchange, we're going to forget that you've been compromising an ongoing intelligence operation, which is a federal crime. We're going to forget that you've shared classified information with unauthorized persons, which is also a federal crime. We're all going to move on with our lives. And if I don't, then you'll be arrested for violating the Espionage Act. You'll spend the next 20 years in federal prison while your pension evaporates and your reputation gets destroyed. And the operation will continue anyway because we'll just adjust our procedures to route containers through different inspectors. Your sacrifice will accomplish nothing except ruining your own life. Crown leaned forward. I'm not the bad guy here, Marcus. I'm trying to help you understand the situation so you can make a smart choice. The world isn't black and white. Sometimes doing the right thing requires getting your hands dirty. Sometimes saving lives requires accepting losses. That's the world we live in. They drove Marcus back to the port and dropped him off near his car. The container inspection paperwork for 9012, C had already been completed and filed by someone else. The container had been cleared and was probably already on a truck heading to Riverside. Marcus sat in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. On one hand, Crown's story made a certain kind of sense. The government did run all kinds of clandestine operations. They did use contractors to do things they couldn't officially acknowledge. Smuggling dissidents out of authoritarian countries was exactly the kind of morally defensible but legally questionable activity that would get buried under classification. On the other hand, Marcus had seen that modified refrigerator. He'd seen the water bottle, the protein bar wrapper, the stains. If this was a rescue operation, why were people locked in refrigerators? Why were they apparently confined without adequate food or bathroom facilities? Why had 12 women died in container 4477? B. If this operation was designed to save lives. And there was something else, something Crown had said that bothered Marcus. Trafficking victims. Crown had referred to the women as trafficking victims. But if Westridge was rescuing them, they wouldn't be trafficking victims until after they arrived. Unless Crown had accidentally told the truth and revealed that Westridge wasn't rescuing victims but creating them. Marcus called Elena Vasquez from his burner phone. They picked me up, he said. Who? Westridge. Guy named Thomas Crown. Former military, definitely private sector now. Told me the whole operation is a classified government program to smuggle dissidents out of China. Said the State Department is in on it, that the FBI's covering for them. Told me if I don't back off, I'll be charged under the Espionage Act. Elena was quiet for a moment. Do you believe him? I don't know. That's the problem. It's plausible enough that I can't dismiss it, but wrong enough that I can't accept it. Tell me exactly what he said. Everything. Marcus repeated the conversation as accurately as he could remember. When he got to the part about the trafficking victims, Elena interrupted. He said trafficking victims? Those exact words. Yes. Why? Because if this was really a rescue operation, the terminology would be different. They'd be refugees, asylum seekers, dissidents, protected persons. Trafficking victims is what you call someone who's been kidnapped and sold. It's what you call merchandise. He slipped up, Marcus. He told you the truth by accident. So what is this really? I don't know yet. But I've got a researcher looking into Westridge's contracts. We found something interesting. They have a Department of Defense contract for what's listed as specialized logistics support in Southeast Asia. $20 million over 3 years. Renewed annually since 2018. The contract details are classified, but the payment records are public. And the timing is interesting. How so? The contract started in 2018. Your Pacific Gateway containers started showing up in port databases in early 2019. Almost like someone set up a supply chain. Supply chain for what? That's the question. But I think I might have a lead. Remember those destination addresses on the manifests? I had someone check them out. Most of them are legitimate warehouses and distribution centers. But one of them, the one in Riverside where container 9012C was heading, isn't listed as any kind of business. It's just an address in an industrial park. No business license, no occupancy permit, no utilities registered. It's a ghost location. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. What do you want to do? I want to see what's at that address. But I can't do it alone. Are you in? Marcus thought about Crown's threat. The Espionage Act. Federal prison. The end of his career. Then he thought about 12 dead women curled in the fetal position among shrink-wrapped automotive parts. I'm in. They met at a diner in Riverside at 8 p.m. Elena brought a photographer named David, a wiry guy in his 40s who looked like he'd embedded with military units and survived mortar fire. The kind of photographer who didn't scare easily. The address is in an industrial park about 10 minutes from here, Elena said, spreading a map across the table. Satellite imagery shows a warehouse, about 20,000 square feet, with a loading dock and a fenced perimeter. There are security cameras visible on the fence posts. So we can't just walk up and knock on the door, Marcus said. No. But we can observe from a distance. See if container 9012C shows up. See if anyone comes or goes. Document what we can. They drove to the industrial park in David's nondescript sedan and parked in a public lot across from the warehouse. The area was quiet. Most of the businesses closed for the night. The warehouse Elena had identified was dark. No lights visible, no activity. They waited. Around 10 p.m., a semi-truck turned into the industrial park and headed straight for the warehouse. Marcus recognized the container on the back. 9012C. That's it, he whispered. David already had his camera out, a professional setup with a telephoto lens that could capture details from hundreds of yards away. He began shooting as the truck backed up to the loading dock. The warehouse's roll-up door opened, and light spilled out. 4 men emerged, all Asian, all wearing work clothes. They began unloading the commercial kitchen appliances from the container, working quickly and efficiently. After the first refrigerator was wheeled into the warehouse, one of the men opened it. Even from across the parking lot, Marcus could see someone climb out. A woman, young, Asian, stumbling slightly as she stood. The man grabbed her arm and guided her roughly into the warehouse. The next refrigerator. Another woman. Then another. 6 women total, extracted from the modified appliances and shepherded into the warehouse. Are you getting this? Elena whispered. Every second, David replied, his camera shutter clicking rapidly. The men finished unloading the container and drove the truck away. The warehouse door rolled shut, leaving the building dark again. Now what? Marcus asked. Now I write the story. I've got documented evidence of people being smuggled in commercial appliances from China to a ghost address in Riverside. I've got your testimony about the pattern, the dead women in container 4477B, the FBI's attempt to shut down your investigation, Westridge's involvement. This is publishable. Crown said this was a rescue operation. Then where are the refugee organizations? Where are the social workers? Where is literally anything that would suggest those women are being helped rather than imprisoned? No. Marcus. This isn't a rescue. This is trafficking. The question is what they're being trafficked for. They sat in the car for another hour, watching the warehouse, but nothing else happened. Eventually, they drove back to the diner and sat in a booth going over David's photographs on his laptop. The images were damning. Women clearly being held inside modified appliances. Men handling them roughly. A clandestine operation at a ghost location in the middle of the night. How long until you can publish? Marcus asked. A week, maybe 2. I need to give Westridge and Pacific Gateway a chance to respond. Journalistic ethics. I'll send them a list of questions and a deadline for comment. Most likely they'll decline to comment, and I'll note that in the article. But I have to give them the chance. What if they don't decline to comment? What if they repeat Crown's story about this being a classified rescue operation? Then I'll include that claim in the article and let readers decide what to believe. But I'll also include the fact that no government agency has confirmed this operation, no refugee organizations have any record of it, and the women appear to be held in conditions inconsistent with a rescue. The facts speak for themselves. Marcus felt a weight lifting off his shoulders. After weeks of feeling isolated, of wondering if he was crazy for not believing the official story, he finally had allies. People who saw what he saw and believed it was worth exposing. Thank you, he said to Elena. Don't thank me yet. The story hasn't published. And between now and then, a lot could happen. Marcus drove home that night feeling simultaneously hopeful and terrified. Hopeful that the truth would finally come out. Terrified of what would happen when it did. He shouldn't have been surprised when he found them waiting for him in his apartment. The lights were off, but Marcus could see the silhouettes of 2 figures sitting in his living room. He reached for his phone, but a voice stopped him. Don't bother, Detective Webb. We're not here to hurt you. We're here to talk. Marcus flipped on the lights. Thomas Crown sat in Marcus's armchair like he owned it. The second man from the SUV stood by the window, alert, hands clasped in front of him. How did you get in here? Locks are suggestions for people with our training. Sit down, Marcus. Please. Marcus remained standing. Breaking and entering is a felony. So is espionage. So is conspiracy to commit treason. Want to compare which charges will stick better in federal court? I haven't committed espionage. You've shared classified information with unauthorized persons. You've compromised an ongoing intelligence operation. You've conspired with a journalist to publish details of a program that exists under national security classification. Pick your favorite statute from the Espionage Act. They all apply. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. I found 12 dead women in a container. I watched 6 more women being locked in refrigerators and smuggled into the country. I saw them being roughly handled at a ghost warehouse with no business license. You call that intelligence work? I call it human trafficking. Crown stood up, and for the first time, Marcus saw genuine emotion on his face. Not anger, but something closer to disappointment. You're a good man, Marcus. I genuinely believe that. You saw something that horrified you, and you couldn't let it go. That's admirable. But it's also dangerous because you don't understand what you're looking at. You're like an ant trying to comprehend an elephant. You see one part of the operation and think you understand the whole, but you're missing the context that would make sense of what you've seen. Then explain it to me. Make me understand. Crown walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot below. Do you know how many containers pass through the port of Long Beach every year? 7 million. Do you know how many of them get inspected? Less than 3%. This country runs on shipping, Marcus. Every product you own, every appliance in this apartment, every component in your car came through a port in a container. The entire economy depends on cargo moving quickly and efficiently. If we had to inspect every container, the economy would collapse. So we accept a certain level of risk. That's not an answer. That's background. Here's the answer. Among those 7 million containers, thousands are being used by criminal networks to smuggle drugs, weapons, counterfeit goods, and yes, people. Every intelligence agency in this country knows it. We know it. We fight it as best we can. But we can't stop every container, so we have to prioritize. We focus on the biggest threats. WMDs, narcotics, weapons that could be used in terrorist attacks. Everything else is triage. So you just let human trafficking happen? No. We redirect it. That's what the Pacific Gateway operation is. Those containers aren't run by some random trafficking ring we're ignoring. They're run by us. We took over a trafficking network 3 years ago and have been operating it as a controlled channel ever since. Marcus felt his worldview tilting. You're running a trafficking network. We're running an intelligence operation that uses the infrastructure of a trafficking network to achieve multiple objectives. 1. We control who comes into the country this way, which means we can prevent actual criminal organizations from using this route. 2. We extract people from China who have intelligence value, dissidents, witnesses to human rights abuses, people who can testify about what's happening in Xinjiang and Tibet. 3. We gather intelligence on how these networks operate so we can shut down the ones we don't control. The women in those containers, they volunteered for this? Some of them. The dissidents, the witnesses, they know they're being smuggled out. They accept the risk because the alternative is worse. But others. Crown paused. Others are recruited through networks that don't fully explain what they're getting into. They're told they'll have jobs in America, good wages, a new life. They pay facilitators in China to arrange transportation. And yes, when they arrive, they end up in debt bondage, forced labor, situations that aren't what they expected. But that's trafficking, Marcus interrupted. That's literally the definition of human trafficking. You recruit them with false promises, you transport them in inhumane conditions, and you exploit their labor. We don't exploit them. The organizations we deliver them to employ them. There's a difference. Is there? What organizations? What kind of employment? Crown was silent. Where did those 6 women from container 9012C go? Marcus pressed. What's happening to them right now in that warehouse in Riverside? They're being processed. Documentation, medical screening, assignment to work locations. What kind of work? Various industries. Hospitality, agriculture, food service, manufacturing. Without work permits. Without legal status. Without any protection under labor laws. They're being paid. They're being housed. It's not ideal, but it's better than what they'd face in China. Marcus laughed, and the sound was harsh even to his own ears. You're telling yourself that story so you can sleep at night. But the truth is you're running a trafficking operation for the government. You're bringing people into the country illegally and delivering them to employers who exploit them. The only difference between you and a cartel is that you've convinced yourself you're doing it for a good reason. Crown's jaw tightened. The world isn't as simple as you want it to be. Sometimes you have to choose between bad options and worse options. Sometimes saving some people means sacrificing others. That's the reality of intelligence work. Then I want no part of it. And I'm going to make sure everyone else knows what you're doing. You mean the article? The journalist you met with tonight in Riverside? The photographs of the warehouse? Marcus's blood ran cold. You were following us. Of course we were following you. We've been following you since you found container 4477B. We know every person you've contacted, every database you've accessed, every burner phone you've purchased. Did you really think we'd let a customs inspector compromise a multi-million-dollar operation without keeping close tabs on him? Then why haven't you arrested me? Because I'm still hoping you'll see reason. Marcus, that journalist you're working with, Elena Vasquez. Do you know why she left government service? She was working on an investigation into defense contractor corruption, and she leaked classified documents to prove her case. The investigation collapsed because the evidence was inadmissible, and she was fired. She's been chasing vindication ever since, trying to find the big story that will prove she was right all along. She's using you, Marcus. She doesn't care about those women in the containers. She cares about taking down the defense establishment. Maybe. But that doesn't make the story untrue. The story as she'll tell it will be misleading at best, dangerous at worst. She'll present Pacific Gateway as simple human trafficking. She'll ignore the intelligence value of the operation. She'll compromise active cases and put lives at risk. And for what? A Pulitzer? A moment of fame? Is that worth destroying an operation that's doing real good in the world? Marcus thought about the 12 dead women. He thought about the 6 women locked in refrigerators. He thought about Crown's careful euphemisms, processing, employment, assignment to work locations. I don't believe you, Marcus said quietly. I think you started with good intentions. Maybe you really were trying to smuggle dissidents out of China. But somewhere along the way, it morphed into something else. The money got too good. The political cover got too convenient. And now you're just another cog in a system that treats human beings as commodities. You've rationalized it so well that you can't even see what it's become. Crown stared at Marcus for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, he said. I tried. I genuinely tried to make you understand. But you're determined to be a martyr, so let me explain what's going to happen. That article won't publish. Elena's editor will receive a call from the Department of Justice explaining that the story contains classified information and that publishing it would violate the Espionage Act. The newspaper's lawyers will kill the story because no media outlet wants to fight the federal government over national security classifications. Elena will scream about censorship, and you'll feel validated, but nothing will change. Then I'll find another journalist, another outlet, and we'll shut that one down too. We'll keep shutting them down until you give up or until we're forced to arrest you. And Marcus, if we arrest you, you won't just lose your job. You'll lose your freedom. You'll spend years in a cell while the operation continues. Your sacrifice will accomplish nothing. Maybe. Or maybe one of those outlets will have the courage to publish anyway. Maybe the story will get out, and people will care enough to demand answers. Crown smiled sadly. You have more faith in the system than I do. But I suppose that's why you're the inspector and I'm the contractor. You still believe the system can be fixed. I know it can only be managed. Crown and his partner walked to the door. Before leaving, Crown turned back. One more thing, Marcus. Those 12 women who died in container 4477B? That was a malfunction in the container's ventilation system. A mechanical failure that we've since corrected. It wasn't intentional, and it wasn't negligent. It was an accident in a risky operation. But because of that accident, we've modified our procedures. The refrigerator compartments you saw in 9012, see? Those have individual air supplies and climate control. We learned from the failure. We adapted. We're doing better. Doesn't that count for something? After they left, Marcus sat in his dark apartment for a long time. He called Elena. They know, he said. They followed us to Riverside. They know about the photographs. They're going to kill the story. Let them try, Elena said, and there was steel in her voice. I've been getting stories killed by the government for 5 years. I know their playbook. We'll publish before they can get an injunction. Crown said your editor will fold when the DOJ calls. My editor is a 60-year-old investigative journalist who cut his teeth covering Watergate. He doesn't fold. Trust me, Marcus. We're going to get this story out. Elena was true to her word. The article published online at 6 a.m. the following Tuesday, before the print edition hit newsstands. The headline read, Inside the Hidden Network Smuggling Chinese Nationals Through U.S. Ports. It was comprehensive, devastating, and meticulously sourced. David's photographs showed women being extracted from modified refrigerators. Marcus's testimony provided the pattern of containers arriving every 17 days. Rachel Torres's research detailed the connection between Pacific Gateway and Westridge security consultants. The ghost warehouse in Riverside was mapped and documented. The 12 dead women in container 4477B were described in careful, respectful detail. The article presented Crown's claim that this was a classified intelligence operation, but it also presented the counter-evidence. No government agency would confirm the operation, no refugee organizations had any record of it, the conditions were inconsistent with a rescue, and the destination locations appeared to be labor facilities rather than resettlement programs. The article ended with a question. If this is truly an intelligence operation designed to rescue dissidents, why does it look exactly like human trafficking? The response was immediate and massive. The article went viral within hours. Cable news picked it up. Members of Congress demanded hearings. Advocacy groups called for investigations. The Customs and Border Protection Commissioner issued a statement promising a thorough review of inspection procedures at the Port of Long Beach. Marcus's phone exploded with calls from reporters, from investigators, from people who wanted to hear his story. He ignored most of them and went to work, because what else was he going to do? Captain Holland called him into the office the moment he arrived at the port. "You're suspended," Holland said without preamble. "Pending investigation into unauthorized database access and disclosure of sensitive information. Turn in your badge and credentials." Marcus had expected this. He surrendered his badge without argument. "For what it's worth," Holland said quietly, "I believe you. I believe those women were in those containers. But I also believe that some things are bigger than us. Some things we're not meant to fix." "I can't accept that," Marcus said. "I know. That's why you're a better man than me." The FBI came for Marcus 3 days later. 2 agents, different from the ones who'd visited his apartment, these ones wearing expressions of professional regret. "Marcus Webb, you're under arrest for violations of the Espionage Act, specifically the unauthorized disclosure of classified information related to ongoing intelligence operations." They cuffed him gently, professionally, and drove him to a federal building in downtown Los Angeles where he was processed, fingerprinted, photographed, and placed in a holding cell. His arraignment was the next day. The charges were read, 3 counts of espionage, each carrying a maximum sentence of 10 years. The prosecutor argued that Marcus was a flight risk and a danger to national security. The judge set bail at $1 million, which Marcus couldn't afford. He spent the next week in federal detention, where he had time to think about everything that had happened. He thought about the women in the containers. He wondered where they were now, if they were safe, if exposing the operation had helped them or made things worse. He thought about Crown's argument that the system could only be managed, not fixed. Was that true? Had Marcus accomplished anything except destroying his own life? He thought about Elena's article, which was still generating headlines, still sparking debates on cable news, still forcing uncomfortable questions about what the government did in the name of national security. On the 8th day, Marcus's public defender came to see him with news. "The prosecution wants to make a deal," she said. "They'll drop 2 of the espionage charges if you plead guilty to the 3rd and agree to a gag order. You'd be looking at 18 months to 3 years instead of 30. "What kind of gag order?" "You can't discuss anything related to the containers, the trafficking network, Westridge, Pacific Gateway, or any classified operations. You can't give interviews, write a book, or make any public statements about it. Permanently." Marcus thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "No deal. I want a trial." His lawyer looked at him like he was insane. "Marcus, the government has you dead to rights on at least one of these charges. You accessed classified databases from your home computer. You shared information about ongoing investigations with unauthorized persons. Those are facts. A jury will convict you. If you take this to trial and lose, you're looking at the maximum sentence. 10 years in federal prison." "Then I guess I'm looking at 10 years. Set the trial date." The trial was scheduled for 6 months later, which gave Marcus time to prepare his defense and also gave the story time to develop. And develop it did. A week after Marcus's arrest, 3 Republican senators and 2 Democratic senators announced a joint investigation into human trafficking through U.S. ports. The investigation would have subpoena power and access to classified information. 2 weeks after that, an anonymous source leaked documents to the Washington Post showing that Westridge Security Consultants had been awarded a classified contract by the State Department for refugee extraction and resettlement services in Southeast Asia. The contract was worth $40 million and had been renewed annually for 5 years. A month after that, a woman came forward. Her name was Lin Chen, and she'd been smuggled into the United States in a Pacific Gateway container 2 years earlier. She'd escaped from a garment factory in Los Angeles where she'd been held in debt bondage, forced to work 16-hour days to pay off the fee for her transportation and resettlement. She testified before the congressional investigation, describing the conditions in the container, the promises that had been made to her in China, the reality she'd found in America. Her testimony was devastating. She described being recruited by people who said they worked for a Christian organization that helped Chinese refugees escape persecution. They told her she'd have a good job in America, legal documentation, a path to citizenship. Instead, she'd been locked in a factory with 30 other women, their passports confiscated, their wages garnished to pay off debts that somehow never decreased. Within days of Lin Chen's testimony, 12 more women came forward with similar stories. Then 30 more. Then 100. The narrative shifted. It was no longer possible to dismiss this as a legitimate intelligence operation with unfortunate casualties. The evidence was overwhelming that Pacific Gateway and Westridge were running a trafficking network that recruited women in China with false promises, smuggled them into the United States in shipping containers, and delivered them to employers who held them in debt bondage. The intelligence justification looked increasingly thin. If this was really about smuggling dissidents, where were they? Where were the testimonies from people who'd been rescued from political persecution? Where was the evidence that Westridge was anything other than a trafficking operation with a government contract? Marcus watched it all unfold from federal detention, where he remained because he couldn't afford bail. His lawyer brought him news articles, played him clips from congressional hearings, told him that public opinion was shifting in his favor. The government's in a tough spot, she said. If they prosecute you aggressively, it looks like they're punishing a whistleblower who exposed human trafficking. If they drop the charges, it looks like an admission that you were right. My guess is they'll offer another plea deal, something that gets you time served and probation. But the government didn't offer another plea deal. Instead, they did something Marcus didn't expect. They dropped all charges. The official statement was brief and legalistic. After further review, the Department of Justice has determined that prosecution of Mr. Webb would not serve the public interest. All charges are hereby dismissed. Marcus walked out of federal detention 6 months after he'd walked in, blinking in the California sunshine, trying to process what had just happened. Elena was waiting for him outside with a cameraman. Marcus Webb, the customs inspector who exposed a human trafficking network operating through U.S. ports, was released today after the Department of Justice dropped all charges against him. Marcus, how do you feel? He wanted to say something profound. He wanted to say that justice had been served, that the system had worked, that truth had prevailed. Instead, he said, "I'm just glad it's over." But it wasn't over. The congressional investigation continued for another year. They interviewed hundreds of witnesses, subpoenaed thousands of documents, and ultimately released a 300-page report that detailed a trafficking network that had operated for at least 5 years, smuggling an estimated 600 to 800 people into the United States through the port of Long Beach and other ports. The report found that Westridge Security Consultants had indeed started with a legitimate contract to help extract political dissidents from China, but that the operation had been compromised by criminal elements and had evolved into a trafficking network. Whether this evolution was intentional or the result of negligence, the report couldn't definitively determine. Pacific Gateway Logistics was shut down. Its assets were seized. 3 of its executives were indicted on trafficking charges. Westridge Security Consultants had its State Department contracts terminated. Thomas Crown resigned from the company and disappeared from public view. Rumors placed him in Dubai, or Singapore, or somewhere in South America. Anywhere the US didn't have an extradition treaty. The women who'd been smuggled in the containers and held in debt bondage were granted T visas, which allowed them to remain in the United States as trafficking victims. Some chose to stay. Others wanted to return to China, despite the risks, because America had turned out to be nothing like they dreamed. Marcus testified before Congress. He told them about finding container 4477B, about the 12 dead women, about the pattern he discovered, about Crown's justifications and threats. He answered their questions for 6 hours, and when it was over, the committee chairman thanked him for his service. "You did what law enforcement should do," the chairman said. "You saw something wrong and you didn't look away, even when powerful people told you to. That takes courage, and this country needs more people like you." Marcus appreciated the sentiment. But he also knew that the chairman had voted for the budget that funded Westridge's contracts. He knew that the system that had enabled this trafficking network was still largely intact, just temporarily embarrassed. The Port of Long Beach offered Marcus his job back. He declined. He couldn't go back to inspecting containers, not after knowing how many blind spots existed in the system, not after knowing how many people in power were willing to look the other way when those blind spots served their purposes. Instead, Marcus started working with an advocacy organization that helped trafficking victims. He used his knowledge of ports and shipping to train other inspectors on what to look for, how to recognize the signs of human cargo. He testified at trials. He spoke at conferences. He became, despite his reluctance, a symbol of whistleblowing and institutional resistance. But late at night, alone in his apartment, Marcus thought about the things he couldn't change. He thought about the containers he hadn't inspected, the ones that had passed through while he was suspended, while he was in detention, while the investigation was ongoing. How many people had been smuggled during those months? Where were they now? He thought about the fact that Pacific Gateway was gone, but the demand for their services wasn't. Some other organization would fill the void, maybe more carefully, maybe with better security, maybe with deeper government connections. He thought about Crown's words. The system can only be managed, not fixed. And he wondered if Crown had been right after all. 3 years after Marcus found container 4477B, he received a package in the mail. No return address, postmarked from Singapore. Inside was a burner phone with a single number programmed in. Marcus stared at it for a long time before he called the number. Crown answered on the first ring. "Hello, Marcus. Why are you calling me?" "Because I want you to know that you were right. About some things. The operation had become corrupt. We'd lost sight of why we started it. The women who died in that container haunted me, Marcus. Still do. Every single night. Good. I left Westridge because I couldn't be part of it anymore. But I also left because I wanted to do it properly this time. I've been working on a new extraction network in Southeast Asia. Smaller, more careful, no debt bondage, no false promises. Just getting people out who genuinely need to escape. I'm calling because I want your help." Marcus laughed, and it sounded bitter even to his own ears. "You want me to help you run another smuggling operation? I want you to help me do it right. You're the moral compass I was missing. You're the person who won't let me rationalize away the compromises. Come to Singapore. See what we're doing. If you think it's another scam, walk away. But if you think we're actually helping people, stay and make sure we don't lose our way again." Marcus thought about it. He thought about the women in the containers, the ones who'd been trafficked and the ones who genuinely needed rescue. He thought about the difference between those two groups and how easy it was to blur the line between them. "I'll think about it," Marcus said finally. "That's all I ask. The offer stands. Whenever you're ready." Marcus never went to Singapore. He never called Crown back. But he kept the burner phone in a drawer, and sometimes late at night, he'd take it out and turn it over in his hands, wondering if there was a way to help people escape without becoming the thing you were fighting against. wondering if the blind spots in the system could ever be truly eliminated, or if the best you could hope for was to illuminate them temporarily before the darkness crept back in. Wondering if Crown had found a way to do it right this time, or if he'd just gotten better at lying to himself. 5 years after finding container 4477B, Marcus was invited to speak at a conference on human trafficking. After his presentation, a young woman approached him. She was Asian, maybe 30 years old, and something about her face was familiar. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "I was in container 9012C, one of the women in the refrigerators. If you hadn't found us, hadn't exposed the operation, I'd still be working in that factory. Or I'd be dead. So thank you." Marcus felt emotion tightening his throat. "What's your name?" "May. I'm studying nursing now. I want to help people the way you helped us." They talked for an hour. May told him about her journey from China, the promises that had been made, the reality she'd found. But she also told him about the T visa that had let her stay, about the advocacy groups that had helped her, about the life she was building. "Do you have nightmares?" Marcus asked. "Every night. But I'm alive to have them. That's something." After May left, Marcus sat in the conference hotel bar and ordered a whiskey. He thought about the 12 women who died in container 4477B, the ones who'd never gotten to study nursing or build new lives. He thought about the hundreds of others who'd been smuggled through the network, and he wondered how many had survived, how many had thrived, how many had been destroyed. He thought about the blind spots in America's vast commercial infrastructure, the gaps where terrible things happened out of sight, and he knew that exposing one network hadn't eliminated the problem. It had just temporarily illuminated a small part of it. But as Marcus sat there, nursing his whiskey and contemplating the limits of what one person could change, his phone buzzed. An email from Elena Vasquez. Got a tip about another network. Different ports, different methods, but same basic model. Want to take a look? Marcus stared at the email for a long time. He could ignore it. He could stay in his new life, speaking at conferences, training inspectors, helping trafficking survivors. He'd done enough. He'd sacrificed enough. Or he could do it again. He could investigate, expose, face the threats and the charges and the weight of knowing too much about how the world really worked. Marcus thought about May, about her nightmares and her nursing studies. He thought about the women still in containers crossing the Pacific right now, locked in darkness, unaware that their dreams of America were about to become something very different. He finished his whiskey and replied to Elena's email. "Send me what you've got." Because the thing about blind spots is that they're always there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to look closely enough to see them. And once you've seen them, you can't unsee them. You can only choose whether to look away or to keep shining light into the darkness, knowing that the darkness is vast and patient and will always creep back in. But for the people trapped in that darkness, even a moment of light can mean the difference between death and survival, between slavery and freedom, between despair and hope. Marcus Webb understood that now. And that understanding wouldn't let him rest. So that's where our story ends tonight, or perhaps where it begins again, because the truth is that operations like the one Marcus uncovered don't really end, they just adapt, evolve, and find new blind spots to hide in. Before you go, I want to ask you something. If you were Marcus Webb, would you have kept digging after that first FBI warning? Would you have risked everything to expose a truth that powerful people wanted buried? Drop your answer in the comments below. I genuinely want to know where you stand on this. And if this story made you think, if it made you question what else might be hiding in the infrastructure we take for granted every single day, then do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, hit that notification bell so you catch the next investigation, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. These stories don't get told unless people like you amplify them. The blind spots are everywhere. The question is whether we have the courage to look. Until next time, stay vigilant.